So, hi everybody. I'm Luca Nussbaum, and I will talk about Debian and Ubuntu. So before we start, who in the room is a Debian developer or maintainer of packages? Okay. And who is an Ubuntu developer, either Motu or core dev? Raise your hand. Oh, that's not much. Cool. Okay, so first, I thought I would start by explaining why I think I'm qualified to give this talk, just so you don't run away thinking I'm going to troll for 45 minutes. So I've been a Debian developer and an Ubuntu developer since 2006, and I've been involved in both distributions for a bit more time than that. I've been involved in improving collaboration between both projects since about that time, actually. I've developed many things, many tools that help collaboration between those two distributions. I attended both DebConf and Ubuntu Developer Summit, so I have an idea of how both projects work from the inside. And I have friends in both communities that I would like to keep, so I know this talk is recorded, so everything I say is, well, carefully said. So I will first talk about the Ubuntu development process and how it relates to the Debian development process, just to make everybody on the same level. Then I will discuss the current state of affairs between Debian and Ubuntu, and then we'll try to discuss the future and what we could do to improve the situation further. So first, the Ubuntu development process. In general, Linux distributions. So what do Linux distributions do? They steal software from upstream project. They put it all nicely together. There's a lot of work going on in this area. And then they take all the fame and the flames for what they did, usually. So yeah, really the important part is this one. That's what Linux distributions really bring to users: standardization, quality assurance, and support. So Ubuntu does the same, except it has one special upstream, that is Debian. There's others upstream than Debian, but that's one of them is Debian. So that's how it works, basically. So there's the user. So Ubuntu user gets packages from Ubuntu, and Ubuntu takes software directly from the upstream projects and also from Debian. But it's a bit more complex than that, because Ubuntu often can't just take the packages from Debian and need to change them for good reasons. For example, the tool chains of the compiler libraries might be different. They sometimes fix bugs that only occur in Ubuntu, or that occur in both distributions. They need to integrate the various packages with Launchpad, for example. And sometimes they want to provide newer releases for specific packages to their users. And it's often not possible to do that work in Debian first. So there are good reasons for Ubuntu to proceed like that and to modify packages that are imported from Debian. So the real workflow looks more like this. So there's upstream projects, Debian, and packages, software from Debian gets either imported directly into Ubuntu or get patched before it's integrated into Ubuntu. So the interesting question is, what are the percentage for this, and this, of course. So this, I'm not giving the detailed process, but those are the results that you can trust. So about 3/4 of Ubuntu packages come directly and modified from Debian. There's 15% that are Debian packages that are modified by Ubuntu. 7% that are only directly packaged from upstream projects by Ubuntu. And if you sum that up, you miss 4% that are newer upstream releases in Ubuntu. And for those, it's difficult to tell whether it's just an update of the Debian version or a fully new package based on the package directly from the upstream project. So if you look at packages which have newer upstream releases in the main section of Ubuntu. So probably those in the back can't read it, but that's fine. If you look at the name, you see lots of KDE stuff, GNOME stuff. So that's really the thing that matters for Ubuntu, for which they want to provide the newer release. If you look at Universe, it's a bit more interesting because you get lots of random packages. So it's really apparently Motus that take the pet package and update it to the latest upstream version, sometimes without, well, often without collaborating with Debian. So in that list, for example, there's ML Donkey, I think it was, or it was there in the past. I can see it, no. Sorry? Yeah. It's between Ubuntu Karmic, well, it starts on Ubuntu Karmic. And, well, it's generated based on the version in Ubuntu Karmic and a bit more logic. But basically, you take the version of the package in Karmic and look at whether it's a same version. It's well, it's the same version as a package in Debian, or it's suffixed with Ubuntu something. No, Ubuntu. Well, when say okay. No. So if the package is okay, if they fork that, if they change that package, say number it Ubuntu 1 like that. So if there's this suffix dash not 0 Ubuntu 1, it's a version that is modified by Ubuntu. Okay. So newer upstream release means something like that. Ubuntu. That's a newer upstream release in Ubuntu. How do you exit that? Okay. But that was in Karmic, and compared to the version of the Debian package when they stopped syncing from Debian, obviously. And now, if you compare it to Squeeze, so Debian testing, most of the packages in Karmic are now older versions compared to Squeeze. So Squeeze has newer releases than Karmic, which is relatively normal since Karmic was released 3 months ago. And those are probably packages which have for some reason have not been updated in Debian for quite a long time, which might be interesting to investigate actually. So from the Ubuntu point of view, managing the divergence between Debian and Ubuntu is really difficult. It requires a lot of manpower, and because for each new Ubuntu release, you need to update all the packages and merge the Ubuntu specific change into the new version of the package in Debian. So there's a strong incentive to push changes upstream, so to Debian. So the goal is really to minimize the delta between Debian and Ubuntu. And there's three different channels used to push changes back to Debian. First, Ubuntu developers file bug reports to forward changes upstream. There's direct interactions within some teams, like the Debian Games team, the Debian, not the Debian VoIP team apparently, but well, there are some teams that with the Debian KDE team, I think does that quite well. So with both Ubuntu developers and Debian developers in the same group, or simply with one person on the Ubuntu side and the Debian maintainer on the other side. There's also the patch to the patch of the difference between the Debian version and the Ubuntu version available on the PTS. The PTS is I'm sure no, I don't have it there. The PTS is the source package-centric view that Debian developers use to get the global view of their package. I will show it later. And DDPO, which is the same but maintainer-centric. So far I've talked about workflow for packages. Now let's look at bugs and bug reports. So currently, Ubuntu users, when they face a bug, have the choice. They can file it upstream. For example, if it's a GNOME bug, file it in the GNOME Bugzilla. and they might get flamed. I'm not sure if it's the case for GNOME, but many upstream projects don't like users to report bugs directly to them. They prefer, because sometimes the bug is caused by local changes in the distribution, so they don't want to get spammed with bugs that did not introduce. They could file the bug in Debian, then they are very likely to get flamed. And the third solution is to file the bug in Launchpad, and then they are very likely to get ignored. So, on the Ubuntu side, many users, so many bug reports, and probably not enough, well, clearly not enough Ubuntu developers for bug triaging and squashing to fix all the bugs that are reported in Launchpad. Also, for many packages, there's not a lot of expertise on the Ubuntu side, especially for niche packages, which are really for a few experts. And then for those packages, it's really, you really get, well, was ever reported a bug in Launchpad? If it was not ignored, I can, oh, everybody got a reply on this bug in Launchpad? Who did not, well, who filed the bug which was ignored in Launchpad for a long time? Okay, not so much actually, because they're doing better than I thought. So I think that it's really important, well, for packages, I think we do okay regarding collaboration, and it's really important that we collaborate on bugs. First, there are quite a lot of packages in Debian, which are niche packages, don't receive a lot of bug reports. I'm not talking here about packages like X or Iceweasel, but well, even if you take, well, lots of packages in Debian have a really low number of users, but for those users, the package is really important for them, for their daily work. And for those packages, but they don't receive a lot of bugs in Debian, it's really easy that bugs exist in the Debian package and just don't get reported, so the maintainer doesn't know about them. There are more users of Ubuntu than Debian. We have no numbers to back this, but I'm pretty sure this is true. So there's a lot more opportunities to run into bugs. And there's also a slightly different environment in Ubuntu, like newer toolchain, newer X server, stuff like that. So we are likely to run into the same issue in Debian later. So even if it's not a bug yet in Debian, it could be a bug in a few weeks or months. And finally, I think that basically my point is I think Debian maintainers should try to work even on Launchpad, do bug triaging on their package on Launchpad, because I think that solving bugs is improving free software, and that's really what matters in the end. It's not about fighting another concurrent distribution. It's just about improving the whole free software world. If you fix bugs, they're fixed for everybody. So currently, regarding collaboration bugs, there are some bugs that get filed in Debian by Ubuntu developers, but they are mostly bugs that are just about upstreaming Ubuntu-specific changes. So those bugs are filed using user tags. So we have a way to track how many of them are filed. Not all Ubuntu developers use those user tags, but it gives a good idea, and there are about 250 to 400 bugs reported that way per Ubuntu release cycle, which is not much, but still a reasonable number. There's also an Ubuntu box on the PTS, so now I can show you the PTS. So that's the PTS package tracking system.
The number for the Ubuntu origin, for the Ubuntu patch, both of them?
I think it's for Ubuntu patch, but I'm not sure. And UDD is down, so we can check. So that's the package tracking system, the PTS, and there's an Ubuntu box there with version of the package currently in the Ubuntu development release, so that's Lucid. The link to the patch between the Debian version, the Ubuntu version, and the number of open bugs. But the data in that box is not completely accurate, especially the number of bugs, because it's really imported using a fragile hack. So it's basically gets a list of all open bugs in Ubuntu, and then W gets each of them separately. It's a bit better than that, but not much. So that generates 80,000 HTTP requests per day on Launchpad. So if Launchpad is slow, it's Debian's fault, actually. And also, it doesn't include private bugs, and there are lots of private bugs in Ubuntu because they use apport, which allows to file bugs with backtrace. And those bugs are tagged private by default because they don't want the user to to provide private information about their system, for example. So there are ongoing discussions with the Launchpad team to solve that, to remove that hack and have a better way to import that data, but it's still not done. So now I will talk a bit about the current state of the Debian-Ubuntu relationship. So that's based on my perception, which is quite fair, I hope. But don't hesitate to ask or to discuss this at the end of the talk, preferably. So on the Debian side first, I think that historically, especially in the start of Ubuntu, many DDs were not very happy about Ubuntu. There was a feeling of being stolen without many communication from the Ubuntu side crediting Debian. There were some claims of Ubuntu giving back to Debian, which were difficult to back with reality, and which are still a bit difficult to back with reality, but not so much to, I will tell later, but not so much to give back, actually. And there's also some problems with some canonical employees, which tend to reflect on Ubuntu as a whole. So Ubuntu developers, canonical employees are humans, and some of them haven't always behaved very well. So this usually hurts Ubuntu as a whole. I think that lately on the Debian side, things have improved considerably, and most DDs see good points in Ubuntu. First, Ubuntu clearly brings lots of new Linux users and Debian derivative users, so it's still better to have them use Ubuntu than Fedora, for example, which is not Debian based. We can be more proud of us if they used Ubuntu than Fedora. Ubuntu also provides something that just works for friends or family. I'm sure that there are many DDs, even if they won't admit it's there, that install Ubuntu systems for our friends or family. Zach, did you install Ubuntu systems? So our next DPL even did that. But it's Ubuntu also brought a lot of new developers to Debian, so people who started developing in Ubuntu and then switched to Debian. So that's, for example, Barry DeFries, Scott Kitterman, Luca Falavigna, Emilio Pozzuelo Monfort, and Alban Tonnerre, which is in the room there. So, and most of them were really good, are really talented developers, so it really reflects very well on Ubuntu, and it helps, of course, improving discussions between both projects. And Ubuntu also serves a technological playground for Debian. So basically, we outsourced breaking the distribution with new stuff to Ubuntu. For example, they tried Dash as bin sh before us. They worked on various boot improvements, debug packages, adding GCC flags. Those are things that were already done or that are being done in Ubuntu and that are much easier to import to Debian later. On the Ubuntu side, there's clearly a culture that contributing to Debian is the right thing to do. At UDS, it's really clear that that's the message that they want to send. And there are many Ubuntu developers that contribute to Debian. But often there's not a lot to contribute back, especially on the packaging level, because many of the bug fixes they do are just workarounds. For example, it's not uncommon to see a package failing to build from source, and they fix it because the test suite fails, and to fix it, they disable the test suite. There are some fixes like that in Ubuntu. So there are some improvements to packages in Ubuntu, but not that much actually to upstream back to Debian. Also, something that is really difficult to deal with for many Debian developers is that Canonical is a company, so it contributes back when it benefits them. And if you want them to contribute back, often you have to convince them that in the end it benefits them, it improves their revenue or reduces their loss. So it's Debian as a whole shouldn't expect many free gifts from Canonical just because they don't do free gifts. There's often a reason. Well, most of the time there's a reason for them to do the gift. But there were some. For example, 2 years ago, they put a banner to celebrate the Debian 15th birthday on their website. That was on the front page of www.ubuntu.com for more than a week, I think. They also have been sponsoring DebConf for several years now. But I think that real underlying issue that we have with Ubuntu from the Debian point of view is the loss of relevance for Debian that it causes to the community. So clearly the Debian user base, or at least market share, so if you don't believe it's a user base that decreased, because probably there are many more Linux users than a few years ago, at least the market share has clearly decreased. Ubuntu won the battle on the desktop and laptop. I'm sure that many of you are using Ubuntu laptops and not so much are using Debian laptops. Our next DPL doesn't use an Ubuntu laptop, I think. So that's good. Also, Ubuntu is starting to make a place on the server because many young sysadmins have always used Ubuntu, so it's kind of logical for them to use Ubuntu on the server as well. And that's kind of worrying to see that more and more for new Linux users, Linux is just Ubuntu and there's not much else to use. And yeah, also recent innovations have happened in Ubuntu first, a lot of them, where Debian has been kind of failing to innovate lately. And as a result of all this, Debian becomes less relevant, even if we are now the basis for the most major community distribution, for Ubuntu, which is also an important fact. So I think that even if we don't need to have a lot of users, Debian doesn't need a lot of users, and we are not running after getting all the new Linux users in Debian. That's not the goal of most DDs. But we need to be relevant and to stay relevant because Debian tends to fight for important values, either technical or political. For example, there was the Iceweasel versus Mozilla thing where Debian took the position to say that Mozilla's conditions about the trademark were unacceptable. And it's really important that Debian is able to make those points and still be heard by the whole community. And if it's just a distribution used by only by DDs, by Debian developers, basically, we won't be heard, and people would just look at us saying, "Oh, what's Debian again? Why are you taking that stance?" Quite well. But the problem is collaborating with Ubuntu is really, and improving it is the right thing to do for free software world domination. If you want to achieve world domination for free software, the fastest path to that is to help Ubuntu, basically. And so the problem is, how do we make Debian relevant again and still help Ubuntu? Because the fastest path may be to just fight Ubuntu. So I think that we should really try to improve collaboration with Ubuntu, and which means improving relationships with Ubuntu developers, most of them are just very similar to Debian developers, actually. There are even some of them hidden in the room, so you see that they're not that different. We should have more cross-distribution packaging teams. Often, well, there are not so many Ubuntu developers with time to spend on stuff in Debian, but some of them are trying to find people to talk to on the Debian side, and often they get kind of rejected by the Debian maintainers. It's quite kind of difficult for an Ubuntu developer to come to the Debian maintainer and say, I'd like to help with your package. We should help Ubuntu maintain our packages. So that means collaborating on release, like notifying them of important transitions, because it's a bit, well, often we have some transitions that are not completely handled with dependencies in Debian, and it's important for them to be notified so that they know that there's something big coming and they should be prepared. And also, yeah, we should try to, for some packages where it's actually possible because we have enough time to do it, we should try to do bug triaging and fixing directly in Launchpad instead of waiting for bugs to flow back to Debian, which doesn't really happen. We should also acknowledge that some high-quality work is done in Ubuntu, and often we tend in Debian to ignore that and just to redo the work ourselves, our way. And we should try to import the high-quality work that is done in some areas in Ubuntu into Debian and create collaboration around it. And Ubuntu has been importing our packages for 5 years. There's no reason why we couldn't import back some of the packages where they do a really good job. Also, something that we have been failing to do is to communicate on why Debian is better. Because, yes, Debian is still better, because if it wasn't, we wouldn't be developing Debian, we'd be developing Ubuntu, probably. So, okay, Debian might not be better for everybody. But we totally fail at communicating that Debian is better. That's quite, well, Bradley Kuhn helped us a few weeks ago when he stopped using Ubuntu and switched back to Debian. But basically, it's the only one communicating that, yes, Debian is better. So let's try to see why Debian is better. So Debian first has better values. Debian is a volunteer-based project, and decisions are taken in the open since 17 years ago. We have been strong advocates of free software philosophy. Ubuntu, on the other hand, is a project that is controlled by Canonical, a company. Some decisions, some important decisions are imposed by Canonical, and there's no way for the community to overrule those decisions. Well, the community could try, but usually it's not really. It's quite clear that there's no way for them to overrule the decisions. For example, there was a debate about Ubuntu One, which is a web service that allows Ubuntu users to store data on the internet, and that's a proprietary web service. So there was a debate about the naming because they use the Ubuntu name, which for a proprietary service, kind of strange, that could have been called Canonical One. There was also recently the switch to Yahoo Search. So that one is interesting because it's the manager of the desktop team just mailed to Ubuntu Devel saying we are switching to Yahoo Search because it will allow us to generate a new revenue stream for Canonical. And there's no way for, well, there was discussion after that, but of course it's not something that you can discuss when you are an Ubuntu community Ubuntu developer. So yeah, Ubuntu advocates proprietary web services like Ubuntu One. The installer recommends to add proprietary software. And if you want to contribute to projects initiated by Canonical, you have to assign copyright to them. Like if you want to contribute to Upstart, you have to assign copyright, which is an issue because it's not the same. Well, VFSF requires the same thing, but assigning copyright to the Free Software Foundation is not the same as assigning copyright to Canonical. Canonical is a company. The FSF has been advocating free software for almost 30 years, so clearly it's not the same problem. But Debian is also a better distribution. In Debian, all packages are maintained except orphan packages, but there are not so many orphan packages. Many maintainers in Debian are expert of their packages. If you take, for example, scientific software, maintainers for scientific software are really are using that software daily and are really expert for it. And there's strong emphasis on quality in Debian. In Ubuntu, most packages, three-quarters of the packages are just synced from Debian. So there's actually no real knowledge, no real expertise on the Ubuntu side about most packages. So if you have a bug, those packages, it might be that they synced it from Debian automatically at a bad time, and the fix is already available in Debian since 3 months ago, and nobody noticed it or was had the knowledge on how to fix it in Ubuntu. And that happens very frequently. And so people are using Ubuntu on their laptop, but I think that Debian testing is really the perfect distribution for your laptop. I don't know many people using Debian stable on their laptop. I think Olga still does that. Okay, some people do, yeah. But Debian testing is really, well, you get very recent software, and you get quite a few problems, of course. But still, those problems that you get are interesting and useful ones. That is, testing is close enough to the upstream projects. There's not so much delay between upstream releases and when the package arrives in testing. That's when you report a bug, it's still at a useful time. If you use Ubuntu stable, you get at least a 6 months delay between the new upstream release and the package gets in Ubuntu stable. So there's almost no point in reporting the bug upstream. Probably it has been fixed a long time ago upstream. Debian testing is a way to detect issues reasonably early while still having a very usable system with very few problems. So to conclude, so I think I have something like 10 minutes left. So we can discuss it a bit. I think that we can't ignore Ubuntu. It's really important that as Debian, we acknowledge that Ubuntu exists and have a position on Ubuntu. We can't fight Ubuntu because that wouldn't be the right thing to do to improve free, if you want to improve free software, which is the thing that most DDs are interested in. And Ubuntu is really a chance for Debian, I think, and we should leverage it to get back in the center of the FLOSS ecosystem. We should work with Ubuntu like a good upstream. That is, we should talk to them, communicate with them about transitions, package bug, help them fix the bugs in Ubuntu. But we should also be more vocal about Ubuntu problems, but still staying constructive, not being not writing completely inflammatory blog posts, but there's a way that you can criticize what they do without being without starting too many flame wars. And this could also help improve Ubuntu and free software as a whole. And I think that we can't just be vocal about Ubuntu, because if we start by if we help Ubuntu, we get to be in a position to criticize them as well. We can't, well, we get to be their friend, but still be able to say them when they do something wrong. Okay, thank you. Questions, comments? No, it doesn't work. Doesn't. No.
Okay. Okay. Now it's nice. You talked about collaborating at the backtracking system level. I'm asking, I'm not an expert, but is there some kind of API between Launchpad and the Debian backtracking system? Because you talked about a small widget that tracks the Ubuntu processing of Debian packages, but I don't know whether there's an API or some kind of integrated systems so they can work together.
So there's a way to, there's an API for Launchpad, so you can query Launchpad using REST as a web service to get information about packages and bugs. But, well, you can write scripts using that. It's quite slow, so it's not the right way to fetch all bugs in Ubuntu, for example. It works if you have 2 packages, one to get the list of bugs, those packages, that would work. But if you have more than 200 bugs, it gets really slow.
Is there...
that's just a way to get information from Launchpad. Then regarding linking of the 2 bug trackers, we have something on the Debian side called BTS link. I'm not sure if it supports Launchpad properly. There was a bug some time ago. In Launchpad, they also have a way to link bugs, Ubuntu bugs to Debian bugs. But the problem is that works if you have the 2 bugs filed in both projects and you want to link them together and be notified when the status change. But in most cases, that's just 1 bug in Ubuntu, no bug in Debian. So the maintainer in Debian doesn't know about the bug in Ubuntu until someone forwards the bug in Debian. So there's only the bug in Launchpad, and the Debian maintainer just doesn't know about it. So for that, there's no real other solution than for the Debian maintainer to go to Launchpad and have a look at the list of bugs.
I think Launchpad automatically sends you an email as a Debian developer if a bug is filed in Ubuntu. No? Well, I am a Debian developer and I have an account in Ubuntu and I have received such emails.
Yes, that's because you are subscribed to the package in Launchpad. You can do that. But by default, you don't get mail. I'm not sure what Debian developers would think of having such a service. Probably there would be some complaint. Maybe we could add something like that and send mail using the PTS as an additional service.
Okay, so I have a question about your expertise on the Ubuntu side of the, let's say, issue. So you said that publicly is really well advertised to contribute back to Debian, like in, I guess, in the code of conduct and at the UDS or whatever. I'm wondering if it is enforced in some way within the community. I mean, if people in the Ubuntu community discover that you have not forwarded something to Debian or that you are not trying to give something back to Debian, do you have some kind of peer pressure that enforce you to that? Well, okay.
I think so, yeah. In the community, it's quite easy to check because it's public. Yeah, I think that, for example, when someone wants to add a new application new package to Ubuntu, most of the time they get told to try to package it in Debian first. Okay. It's not always the case because often when you try to find a sponsor in Debian, it's really hard to find a sponsor. But I think that's really, yeah. Okay. And it's documented like that as well on the Ubuntu wiki.
Yeah, from talking to Mark Shuttleworth regularly.
Ooh, yeah, okay, yeah.
He's made a point of saying every time we talk that he is pressing his people explicitly to contribute back to Debian wherever they can. He wants us to work more closely together. Obviously, it helps everybody.
So we want to be a good upstream to Ubuntu, but the sad fact is that they're a bad downstream, because most of their packages, like you said, 74%, they have no maintainers, and the bugs never get forwarded to us because there's no one taking care of the bugs, reviewing them, and then forwarding them upstream. So for most of the packages there, they're abandoned or unmaintained or whatever you want to use the term for, but they're bad downstream, and there's nothing we can do about it. But join Ubuntu to join the Launchpad and review bugs there, which is not very fair for us to do.
Well, most of the bugs in Ubuntu, well, some I don't know about the VoIP team specificities, but most of the bugs in Ubuntu also apply or applied to Debian at some point.
Yeah, but you have to go into Launchpad and see them,
Sometimes
or go
it's the
to
case,
RPTS and have it integrate, have Ubuntu integrated into RPTS, so we can see the bugs, because we don't get them on our bug tracking system.
Yeah.
We don't expect GNOME to go into bugs Debian.org and see the bugs and reply there and fix them there.
Yeah, no, I'm not asking to do that for all packages, but I don't know about the number of bugs in for your packages, but for some of my packages, I have like 1 bug filed per month and 2 bugs filed per month in Ubuntu, and most of the bugs filed in Ubuntu also apply to Debian package. It's just that nobody in Debian filed them.
Exactly, yeah.
So those are interesting bugs for me, and I'd like to fix them because they matter to both distributions, and it's just that.
If you had 10 Ubuntus, 10 downstreams, I mean, now there's MyAmo that's...
yeah, but Ubuntu is
going up.
special. I mean, you can't say that Ubuntu is just another Debian derivative. They are like 95% of the, at least 95% of the user base of our derivative. So I think that we can special case Ubuntu and try to have a look at their bug tracker. I mean, which other big Debian derivative do we have?
Yeah, I'm thinking about other derivatives that may come up in the future, like MyAmo.
Yeah, but maybe at some point we'll have a MyMo box and we have two big Debian derivatives, but MyMo is not there yet. Yeah. Sorry?
In Brazil, there's a Debian-derived distribution for education with 30 million users.
Yeah, but
So there are other big
yeah, but we
derivatives.
don't hear from them about development. So the point is not about the raw number of users, but also the number of users who report bugs, who have the expertise required to report bugs. I don't know about that distribution, and maybe we could have a list of big Debian derivatives. But as Vincent Unz said yesterday in his talk about Vincent Unz is GNOME release manager, and he tracks the patches made to GNOME packages in some distributions, and he doesn't check them for 100 distributions. He checks them for the 5 or 10 main distributions, and if we have 5 or 10 main Debian derivatives, it's still manageable to have a look at them and help them. And currently we have 1 where we have that problem. When we have 5, we can discuss again and find more scalable solutions, but
Sure.
I don't see any.
The point was that they're bad downstream. They're popular, but they're not doing their job right. That was my point.
Yeah, we're not doing our job right for many packages as well.
Sure.
So
Not for the 75% of our packages, though.
yeah, but well, I'm not sure. Maybe yeah, we have lots of packages, lots of open bugs as well. No, not 75, sure, but they bring other things, and also they don't have infinite resource, and as we don't have infinite resource, and they are just. I mean, it's really a shame that there are not more Ubuntu developers coming to FOSDEM, because they had a development sprint at the same time. But really, they're just like us. I mean, there's no reason to see them that differently. So, and usually they are nice guys. Not all of them, but we could say the same in Debian.
I'm asking another question related to the backtracking system. You said that almost 3/4 of Ubuntu packages are directly imported from them without any important modification. Wouldn't it be better in those cases, at least, that people willing to fill back in Ubuntu to be redirected to the Debian backtracking system in order to feed directly into Debian because there's no Ubuntu maintainer? It's just another question though.
I'm not sure how Debian developers would feel about that, because some bugs can be caused by a difference in the rest of the system. So, for example, some bugs can be caused by a difference in other packages that could be different in Ubuntu compared to Debian. Like you can have an application that fails to build in Ubuntu because the compiler is different in Ubuntu and Debian. So that bug should not be filed directly to Debian. At some point, probably, it's an interesting bug for us because it means that when we will update GCC as well, we'll run into that bug. But by default, I don't think that's a good idea to file bugs. But there's also a lot of people talking about linking links between bug trackers. There's a European project in Paris, at least, well, I mean, there's a team in Paris participating in that project. So it's likely that in the next years, we'll get the outcome of such efforts, and there will be easier ways to share data between bug trackers.
On this,
Two questions. Oh.
I've been told for a Launchpad account for a Debian developer should mark, okay, I am a Debian developer. Is that true? And if so, could you tell me more about that?
I don't know anything about that. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
There's no special status for Debian developers on Launchpad, I think. There's no special. Yeah, but is it used? I didn't. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's any special right for Debian developers on Launchpad. There's another question, just two rows.
it seems to me that Ubuntu needs Debian more than Debian needs Ubuntu generally, and Ubuntu users, the way I see it, are not necessarily Debian users, and in 5 or 10 years' time, there's nothing to guarantee that they will be. So why should Debian developers put in the extra effort to support a project that isn't theirs, ultimately?
Yeah. Sorry, what was the end? Could you repeat the end of the question? I didn't get the last.
I just said, so why should Debian developers as a whole be expected to contribute to a project that isn't theirs and they have no control over?
Well, I think that's a real final goal is not to have Debian win that battle. And the goal is to get better free software in general and not just improve Debian. And currently there's Ubuntu, which is a really important distribution, especially for new Linux users. Ubuntu is not perfect, clearly. There are lots of problems that Ubuntu users run into. And we have the power to, yeah, but I mean, there's okay, should I stop or? Okay, so I can, I mean, there's no talk just after me, I think. I can run over time a bit. So if you want to leave, you can leave. So what was I saying? Ubuntu is, I think Ubuntu is special currently, and we have the power to help them, and it's the right thing to do to help them, because it improves free software as a whole. But clearly, Ubuntu is not perfect as well, both from a values point of view and from a distribution point of view. And we need to communicate that much more than we currently do, so people learn about the difference and what the kind of values that Debian has and Ubuntu doesn't have. Okay, thank you.